Hi, everybody. Welcome to Why Am I Yelling Live? I'm Krista Rizzo, and today my guest is Shweyta Mudgal. She is the founder of 8,000 Miles, which is an ethical, handmade lifestyle brand that empowers artisan communities and celebrates all things handmade. She has a very interesting story that I cannot wait for you guys to hear. She used to be an airport architect, which to me is a fascinating thing. So we're going to talk to her right now. We're going to say welcome to Why Am I Yelling Live? We're so glad you're here, Shweyta, and tell us all about why you're yelling, why you chose to go into a completely different career path from being an airport architect into owning a ethically made brand. And then we'll go from there. So hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on your show.
My pleasure.
And for listening to my yelling, as you call it. So
Yelling a little bit before, yes.
The journey started close to like 4 or 5 years ago when my husband and I took an intentional global move from New York to Asia. We're from India, from Mumbai specifically, and I had been working as an architect specializing in transit design and airports in my architectural career. And as part of that, I had a really great opportunity to work on the design of the Mumbai airport, which is where I'm from. So as part of that, I kind of moved to India, to Mumbai for a few months, almost half a year, in fact. And we also sort of would go back and forth a lot to India to work on the project. That was sort of the path-breaking, moment of my life after I'd moved here as a student and lived here for a few years. What I realized was Mumbai is very livable. Of course, I was born, brought up there, so it was very different, but I like to believe that I grew up in New York, which is where I led a lot of my sort of individual, adult life.
Yep.
And so going back to Mumbai was an eye opener of sorts. There was always this idea of nostalgia and home and everything, family, but also my attachment to the city because I studied my undergrad there in Mumbai. And so as part of studying undergrad architecture, we use Mumbai as our experimental ground. And so I have a lot of attachment to the city, and so I realized it would be fun to kind of come and live here again, or at least be able to call both cities home.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of when the seed was implanted. I think I came back to New York after a 6-month gig of working on the airport in Mumbai, and told him maybe we should try to think of life in both cities and countries therefore. And he was like, yeah, it might be doable. Let me see if I could do something through work. And, literally almost like a year later, this opportunity fell in his lap. And then as part of which we moved to Asia. So we first moved to Singapore for a year and then to Mumbai for the next year. We also had our daughter who was a year old when we did this move. So it was almost like the first 3 years of her life. What was great was, the year in Singapore was very unplanned for, but we used that as our launching pad for travel to that part of the world. And that's, I think, when I really reconnected with my love since childhood of sort of textiles and handmade. A lot of the things that I did as a child, or even as a growing sort of middle schooler, was to just pick up scraps of fabric and go to our local tailor and design them into like bags and dress trend or things like that. And just the idea of having access to so much sort of not just textile richness, but also the idea of having people who can make this for you and who will design with you was great for me. So I think that year in Singapore was also formative in the formation of 8,000 Miles because we traveled so much through textile rich countries. And then when we moved to Mumbai, I found a little sort of small unit to work with me. And I think that's when 8,000 Miles was born in 2014 in February. So throughout all of this, this was my journey, sort of 8,000 miles away from New York into India, which is why the name of the company, and also sort of my transition from my educational career of being an architect and designer into being sort of a textile designer and now an entrepreneur.
Right.
And then there was also this idea of always rooting whatever I did as a business into social impact. And so that's kind of how I started laying the business model out, where, social impact is the core of our business. We only work with fair trade organizations
Okay.
that are composed of women and men, essentially, who have been disadvantaged in some way or the other, but are also now sort of, coming back on their own, and work directly with us. So this was the whole sort of, the transition from my airport architecture days to textiles. And it will be 6 years this February.
That's amazing. So now that you are fully immersed in 8,000 miles and this brand, how do you choose your artisans? Like, where is there a vetting process? I mean, I'm sure there's a vetting process, but like, how do you source them?
So, when I started literally with ready-made pieces of fabric, which is what I would do even when I was growing up in India.
Right.
And then I realized that the designer in me was like, no, we have to kind of design things, not just designing sort of a pattern or a style, but even designing prints and kind of, giving more of an individualistic identity to our brand, is what I kind of this was year 2 of the brand. And I was like, wait, maybe we need to get there. So at that point, I started my search of artisans who could kind of, literally realize my drawings into prints. And because I've grown up in India and I know and I'm aware of the process of block printing, which is essentially manual hand printing of drawings onto fabrics. I just took my mom and went to Jaipur, which is in the west of India, in a state called Rajasthan. And and I went to smaller villages around Jaipur, which is where block printing families hail from. They've traditionally lived there since years. These are the Chippas. The community is called the Chippa community. And I went around literally just trying to cold call into their homes to find somebody who could work with me and who could realize my drawings. I took a few drawings that I had. And I think the whole search started when I wanted to turn that sketch into not really a print on fabric, but more like a sketch on the fabric.
Yeah.
I needed it to look like it was drawn on the fabric and it was handmade as against looking very digitally done. So that's kind of what, took my search out there. I found a few families. We translated my drawings into wooden blocks, which is how the process takes place. And then we stamped them onto fabrics. We did a lot of samples. And I was convinced that this is, how it's going to be from here on. This was almost 5 years ago because it was after the first year of the brand in India. And since then, we've literally every year been doing different prints, I draw everything. It gets translated onto wooden blocks. I cannot wait to go and see how those blocks print on the fabric, because there is a little bit of a transition between my drawing into the block, because it gets hand carved onto wood by by people who carve the blocks, and then it gets hand stamped further on by artisans who've been doing this for almost 4 generations.
Amazing.
So it's excellent how the transition takes place from my drawing onto the fabric. And then of course there's this whole thing where we do color swatches, and there's always this visualization that I have when I'm sitting here in New York drawing it on my desk. But when we go back and I kind of sample it with my team in Bagru in Rajasthan, that's the village that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It just is a whole different thing. Sometimes it's literally what I imagined it to be, and sometimes it's just, oh, it could be this too, so why not,
Right.
And so it's a very collaborative process, because the people I work with have been doing this for so many years now that they have a higher level of experience when it comes to stamping and printing fabric.
Right.
So when I go to them saying, oh, this is what I'd imagined, I want this to be this way, they're like, no, but have you tried it this way? And then they'll create this sort of a nuance into my work. And then it's so over the years now, because we work together for a few years, we understand each other, it's become a collaborative process. And it's just so exciting to see that first block emerge on the fabric and see how it's going to look.
This process is so fascinating to me. And I was looking at your stuff, and I'm going to ask you where you sell it and all of the things. But it's really beautifully done. The patterns are beautiful. The styles are beautiful. So tell everybody what you actually make out of these patterns that you create.
So I'm wearing something that I made.
It's gorgeous.
This is our, like, here you can see the sunflowers. So this is something that we are launching this year. It's a new print. And so we hand print, as I was explaining to you, on meters and meters of fabric. All the fabric we use is organic cotton of a 60s count, which is very, very soft cotton. And so once we do that, all of the fabric is then ours because there are designs. And we typically, because I started out with kids' clothing, we typically do children's clothing. So we have a few styles and, which we've kind of continued to work on throughout the years because they've been popular, but we also keep coming up with new designs and patterns. And every year we kind of, because we've been growing so fast, every year we've been introducing something new. So we've had, we may have started with like kids clothing and pajamas. The next year on, we started with adults pajamas because we were one of the first people who decided that, clothing for children should be gender neutral. I mean, there really is no reason why it should be pinks for girls and blue for boys. And this was in 2014, back then when there were not many brands in India doing this or taking a stance like that.
Right.
So, so then on, our print sort of, depicts what we make out of it, and also vice versa, where we've decided that because there are going to be no girl specific or boy specific prints, everything works for everybody. So most of our styles were for children. They still are. They're pretty much loose fit, unisex, gender neutral shirts, bottoms, shorts. And then we do a few dresses. We do rompers, which also work very well as gender neutral. And then we started, as I was telling you, graduating to adult pajama sets. Because our kids' pajama sets were gender neutral, we had a lot of people asking us for those in adult sizes.
Oh, right, matching.
So we started that, a couple of years ago, which was great because they've been received really well. 2 years ago, we started doing loungewear, so we also do robes now. The shift will probably be into home furnishing very, very soon. So I think we see ourselves as a brand which also kind of works in the direction of what the fabric tells us to do. The fabric is beautiful. It's very, very easy to maintain.
Yeah.
And the prints look great pretty much across clothing to even handkerchiefs or, towels or things like that. So I think that's essentially how we've been, working. Yeah.
What has been your biggest struggle through this whole thing? Like, I'm interested, I want to know, because this sounds like an undertaking, right? You are starting like wood blocks and ideas and patterns and prints. And I want to know what your biggest struggle was and how you overcame that and continued to move on. Because I'm sure this was not an easy process.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I also come from not a textile background. I don't have a degree in fashion. I don't have a degree in social entrepreneurship either. So when I started, I literally started out of a passion to get back into doing something that I grew up doing, but not just that, also sort of an outlet for my designer, upbringing through architecture and different other aspects of design that we're exposed to when we're educated in the architectural, subjects.
Sure.
So I feel like when I started, there still is a huge learning curve in the entire process.
Right.
Some of the biggest challenges I've faced have ironically been working with the fair trade units or the socially empowered sewing units that we actually work with. Because I choose to make with non-commercial units, we often run into problems such as professionalism. We run into social problems where, because we choose to work with a lot of women, there are times when the women are not available or they cannot be available because they have to look after people at home first.
Sure.
So we have a lot of these kind of problems that we still continue to have them, although we've now put together a very sort of fixed construct, that this is how we're going to work going forward. These are the holidays we're going to take.
Yeah.
This much, these are the hours we'll work every day and things like that. I think when you work with the kind of people that I choose to work with, there's also a lot of social pressure on them, such as, just having to be home for your children because you are not the prime sort of breadwinner of the family.
Right.
So now we've kind of gone around it, and I've associated myself with very, very strong women who run the sewing units for me. And so also are encouraged and also want to kind of go down the path of progress for themselves and their families. They're, extremely independent. They're very, very reliable. And they're very, very communicative because we are 8,000 miles away after all.
Yeah.
So it's great because we've now sort of come around that problem that I used to face. It still continues to occur sometimes, but it's something which now we've taken in, our stride.
Sure.
The other issue that I've often faced with is because we're so small in terms of being, manufacturing everything in small batches.
Yep.
We're not a factory, So, and we're always trying to make sure that the women or the men who work with us don't go assembly line, which means every particular individual makes the entire piece of, makes
amazing.
the entire unit from start to scratch because, they know something. They're not cogs in the machine. They're actually just, making things for us. And so it's something that they have to be happy with as well. And they get paid per piece. So there's that too,
Right.
So I feel like that's something which we've insisted on, being a part of what we do, which also brings problems because then, there are a lot of the times we have the sewing units we worked with in the past tell us that, no, you have to tell us, you have to give us more MOQs, which are, basically quantities have to be larger. And that's difficult in our profession. It's not so difficult if we went mass wholesale, but we also choose not to go mass wholesale because we have a story to tell. So we are very, very particular about the stores that buy from us. We are wholesale, but we also are very particular about who we're selling to and how they're, sort of telling our story to their end customer. So that has been also a problem. And then the last sort of, or one of the biggest problems, which has absolutely no solution, is the fact that I live so far away from my team. I really wish that somehow India and the US were much closer. Yeah. What helps is I'm based in New York, so I'm really not a long flight away, not long for me, which is 14 hours nonstop. So I can go back and forth, and I do that close to 3 to 4 times a year. Okay. I absolutely love it.
I think that is amazing. And having a structure where you can be 8,000 miles away from your, like the production line of your company and your product. And then how does it get, does it ship to you in the United States? How do you fulfill orders? Does it go directly from India? Like, how does that work?
No, so we're a US based company.
Okay.
So everything gets shipped to me. It comes here to New York, and then it gets shipped out, depending on the stores. And we were planning to expand. Hopefully, if we globally expand at some point, we will be able to distribute from India directly. But I'm at a point where I need to have it with me before I can send it out. So there's a lot of quality checks that go through and things like that. So I feel like I'm more at that. I'm more comfortable having it come to me first. And then
I would want it to come to me just so I could try it all on and be like, oh my God, look how gorgeous. I need to keep this. And then there's this, and the little ones need to keep that. I would be terrible at this. Where can we find your stuff?
So we have an Etsy page. We're in the works. We're trying to also just sort of, go e-commerce on our website. Our website is called www.8000miles.com. You just spell out everything. I know it's really long, but it was important to not be, numeric 8,000 miles in the distance because it's a story. So
yes.
Anyway, so that's where So once you log onto the website and you try to buy, you hit on shop now. It takes you to our Etsy page. And then that's where you can shop online.
That's right.
We moved the business to almost 80% wholesale last year. As part of that, we have a lot of prints and styles and designs that are not on our Etsy page. But I do happen to have a following. And so what we do is every time people write to us, we'll send them out something which, which kind of will tell them what's in store now, what's new, what's not. But starting this year, we plan to also sort of emphasize more on our Etsy and our website so that even our retail customers can directly shop from us.
Right.
As against just being sort of, wholesale and B2B oriented.
Right.
So
like I want that shirt that you have on. Where do I find that shirt?
Well, I'm wearing my sample right now. That's another reason why they have to come to me, because I need to see the samples. If they look good and I feel like I have to keep one for myself, that's when I say that, okay, we need to make these for stores.
Right. I mean, that will sell out. I can name like 50 places you could sell that. I'm in Brooklyn, so, we're in New York City together. So it's like, I know 17 people who would buy that right now off the top of my head.
So we do a holiday market every year. It's kind of become like a custom now. We started in the first year of our business, 2014, at Columbus Circle.
Oh yeah.
And this was year 6. We just wrapped it up last month. And so that's where all our local sort of following comes from. And yeah, this piece actually we did make a few for the market, and we sold out on this week. It comes in another style with a sort of a peachish background, and we made those into robes, and we were done. We had yeah. It was a big hit, so I'm hoping to see people in New York wear this over summer.
I mean, you need to let me know as soon as it's available so I can get myself one, please. What other lessons have you learned? Like, what have been your biggest lessons? You've talked about your hurdles, but being somebody with a background that is not in this business that you're in now, right? Coming from a design background and an architecture background, but now that you are a mom, like what drives you to stay and be so, because I love your conviction about how you're going to produce your product, and you don't want to go, mainstream, and you don't want to go mainstream manufacturer, and you want to keep it the way that you're keeping it. And I think that is so important. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who shop based on those needs, especially today. Like I talk about it all the time in these talks, but I have a son who's in high school in Manhattan, and he goes to the High School for Environmental Studies, and they are, it's so interesting as somebody who went to high school 30 years ago, right? Education has changed. The way that we are treating our children changed, the way we speak to them and give them, autonomy and independence and all of that stuff. But what they're learning and how to be more socially conscious and more aware of what's happening around them in the world, environmentally, and just everything. It's eye-opening for me as a parent. And I, living in New York City, especially, right? Like we are exposed to so many different cultures, and the diversity here is just amazing. It's like my favorite place on the planet. But keeping that in mind with how you've grown your business and you want to continue to grow your business, what's been the best part about it, and what has your lifestyle contributed to it as a traveling mom with, married and all the things? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So as I mentioned to you, when our daughter was raised in 3 countries so far. The first year of her life, she was born in New York. So she was born in Manhattan, but we lived in Jersey City the first year. The second year, she was in Singapore with us. The third year, she was in Mumbai with us.
Right.
Fourth year onwards, she came back. And then she's been in New York since. She's 8 now.
Okay.
We've been avid travelers. We always were, my husband and I, even before we met each other. And I think after our 2 forces collided, we've just gone a little that, and then the whole sort of the global move that we did, where the 2 years that we moved from New York to Asia, we ended up across 25 countries.
Wow,
with our daughter, who was only 2 or 3 then.
Right.
So, travel is something that was always part of our lives, and it continues to be even today at the shortest notice. And, my sort of work culture and my work ethic helps in that, because of the fact that I get to go back and forth through work, that I can always combine it with a trip to somewhere else, or either for inspiration or to, just to even take my daughter somewhere, or for a family trip. She grew up seeing that. The company was started 2014, the first year when we were based in Mumbai. She was with me. She saw me set it up. She was only 3 then. And she kind of knew that something's happening, and my mom's starting a business. And she was also like the first model for all our, samples and things like that. So she knew something was happening. When we came back to the US, this was at the end of 2014, and she was only like 3.5 or close to turning 4 then. I continued to sort of run my business in India, but I also wanted to kind of start setting it up in New York. So while I was based in New York after our move, I continued to travel back to India 4 times a year, out of which 3 trips were without her.
Right.
So she continued to live here, and you should know that my husband is also a traveling spouse. So he, on sort of because of the nature of his work, is pretty much travels during the week.
Yeah.
But when I went to India, I traveled for weeks. And so we've had, since she was 3 years old, we've had oftentimes situations where neither of us, my husband or I, were available to be in New York,
right,
with her. And at that point of time, I either had the option of taking her with me or trying to find help or see if somebody could help us out. And so I didn't want to take her with me at that point because the business was still young and it kind of almost needed, I call it my second baby because it needed more attention. Mm-hmm. She was, because of the nature that she sort of, I don't know, she just has a personality. And I think we have a little contribution towards trying to make her a little independent.
Sure.
She was raised in that way ever since she was young. Since she was 3.5, we have this great group of friends in New York. We're almost family, and they're always there for us when we need them. Many of them at that point were single, and they were like, yeah, sure, we'll come stay home with her.
Wow.
And we'll go to school the next day, and that's fine. And so since she was 3, she's used to friends of ours taking care of her when neither of her parents were around.
That's amazing.
And she never complained about it. She would always be, in fact, I kind of had this mom guilt when I first would travel. And my husband was like, okay, should I stay back? Maybe she's not going to be okay. We tried it out, and then she thrived. She was, of course she had her own ways of sort of trying to get more from out of our friends, than her mommy would allow her or something. But, whatever, she made it work. And I totally understand, when people say that women are able to work because their children sometimes let them.
Yes.
And I actually totally see that, she has always been there, ready to sort of, in her ways, when she did not know. And now when she does, and she's 8 and, going on 18 in her head almost, when she's so encouraging of my work, she's called herself like the model of my line, but also now she's sort of involved in the designing of it, in almost the running of it. There are times she knows the drill.
Yeah.
She can do inventory with me. She knows sizing. She knows what's in and what's not because she's 8, growing up in New York City.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so she, but also almost my business partner at this point. She has these dreams of taking the business forward when she grows up, and as soon as she can latch onto it in a more sort of a, grown up way. But yeah, so she has always kind of been that source of inspiration, and that push, the wind beneath my wings, to kind of tell me that, go mama, just go, it's okay, but when are you coming back? Right. So she's always had that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then she's come with me to the block printing units. She knows their children. She plays with them. She sends them gifts when I go visit. So I love the fact that we've created this sense of community for her.
Yes.
Also back home with the children of the people I work with, because they are family now. So that has been really, really nice, to see that. And to your point of her being a New Yorker, growing up here, seeing how, things are, so many different cultures colliding. She understands where we come from, and she understands because it's very hard for me to raise her here as not a privilege.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I kind of, just stories from my childhood of saying that, my mom was a public school teacher back in India, where every time we had a little tiny pencil, which we wanted to discard because it had gotten this small, my mom would be like, don't throw it away. Give it to me, and I'll take it to my school where kids can't afford to buy stationery, and they'll put these little caps on it to make it tall enough so that they can use in writing. And so this is my favorite story to tell my daughter. And the best part about the business lifestyle that I've chosen for myself, and the fact that I can take her back and forth because of it, whenever I choose to, is her connect to life there and to seeing this actually happen there.
Yep.
Which makes her realize that she is so privileged to grow up the way she's growing up.
Yeah.
And she's so blessed and, fortunate to have for herself everything that she does today.
Right.
So that she understands that giving back has to come before getting something.
Yep.
And, I feel like in that sense, my business is also helping her see it and learn from it, and in some way I'm hoping that I can, make her into this person who will appreciate this more than be like, what are you doing?
I'm sure that is exactly what's happening. This has been such an amazing conversation. I have enjoyed this so much, and learning about what you do and the process, and being a female founder and teaching your daughter, which is huge. I mean, I have 2 sons and they see me do this every day, right? They start my business and go away recently, and I'm on the road more often now. And it's, and mine are older. Well, not really. Mine are 14 and 7. So yours is right in between mine. But it's nice to know that you have their support, even when the mom guilt kicks in, because you're like, well, but they said it was okay for me to go, even though I feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Because I think that is something that women, especially, we have a hard time dealing with, right? We have a hard time accepting it. We have a hard time walking away and saying, you're going to be okay, and trusting that that's going to actually happen. And then when it does, we get really excited about it, because then it's like, we can do it again and again and again, right?
It's almost addictive at that point, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Totally. And when you have a spouse who can either help you or you can figure out how to make it work, that's even better. So that's my thing. I thank you for being here. Thank you for teaching us about how your process works. Thank you for creating this brand, which I'm sure is going to be like gigantic at some point. But I love that you're sticking to your guns and you're really connected to the people that work for you, and you're like family, and that is really important. And I thank you for that contribution, because I think that's huge.
Thank you so much for having me.
So everybody, you need to go find 8,000 Miles on Etsy. I will post, the link will be posted in all of the notes and all of the things, and where you share it all over, because I need to get one of those shirts, and it needs to happen soon.
Yeah.
And parting thoughts, I hope you guys all have a great weekend. Shweyta, thank you so much for being here. I wish you so much continued success, and I cannot wait to watch 8,000 Miles like take over everything. And that's it. So I hope you guys,
for having me.
you stay right there. We're going to log off right now. Thanks everybody for watching. We will be back here next week with another edition of Why Am I Yelling Live?